Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Monday. Brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. Hope your work week is off to a good start. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, and fired up. You're spending some time with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Denton Day, an hour and a half from right now, talking college football playoff. Carr out for the season. We're going to talk about that. LSU got a basketball win yesterday in the PMAC, and Saints got a win, but their quarterback, as we mentioned, is out. So lots and lots to get to here on this Monday. So let's get things rolling the same way we do each and every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Every car on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge, online, genesisofbatonrouge.com. I want to start today with the transfer portal because it's open. And we got news last week about some players who were expressing their intention to get into the transfer portal, but no one could actually enter said portal until today. And so LSU has not seen any sort of mass exodus here today. The only name that I have seen thus far that has announced their intention that we did not already know about was Nathan Dibert, who handled kickoff duties in 2022 and 2023, but Aaron Burrell took the reins of that role this year, so Dibert will look elsewhere to finish his college career. But nobody else from LSU's roster today that I have seen has announced their intention to enter the transfer portal. You've got a couple of weeks to get that done. But what I did want to talk about today, as it refers to LSU, was what LSU needs to be looking for in the transfer portal. I've got a story up at louisianasports.net, and you can read probably in a little bit more depth than I'm going into here in a 10-minute radio segment. But I talked about what LSU needs to be shopping for in the transfer portal. Last year, we knew that LSU was very much in the market for defensive tackle, and we also know that the defensive tackle market was pretty limited, so the supply and demand dictated that the values went up for those players in terms of NIL money, and LSU did not want to play with the big boys in that way for those specific players. So you ended up with a transfer from Grand Valley State instead of one from a Power 5 school. That was the mentality that LSU had a year ago this time. This time around, I think you're going to see LSU swim in the big pool. We've seen LSU in the transfer portal over the last 3 seasons really rely on a lot of Louisiana kids who had gone elsewhere and come back. The Jarek Bernard Converses, the Logan Diggs, guys who were from the state, played a couple years elsewhere, came back to finish their time at LSU. Maybe in the case of Zy Alexander or Kyron Lacey, played at a smaller school in Louisiana and wanted to go play for the flagship and played at LSU. But a lot of LSU's portal, not all of it, certainly got your Miles Fraziers and your C.J. Daniels, and you've got some guys that don't have any ties to the state, but a lot of the guys that they've taken have just been guys who wanted to come home. That's not the case anymore. You've got to go get impact guys, not ancillary pieces like dudes. And I think LSU is positioned to do that. Now, they're going to have to prove me right on that, because to this point, they haven't necessarily shown that they're willing to swim in those waters, but they've got to try that. And I wrote a piece at LouisianaSports.net, as I said, that went through the top 5 needs that I think LSU has. There are more, but these are the ones that I ranked 1 through 5 in order of significance. And I started with the same position that I talked about last week singularly, and that's wide receiver. You look at wide receiver with this team right now. Kyron Lacey is gone. He was your number 1. C.J. Daniels is gone. He was one of your top options. Landon Ibieta and Shelton Sampson have announced that they're going to go into the transfer portal. And you've got Kyle Parker, who's hurt. He had the triceps injury that cost him the second half of the season. So the only healthy wide receiver options moving into 2025 on this team right now are Aaron Anderson, who had a really nice year, Xavier Thomas, who's really athletic and fast and a little bit undersized like Anderson, Chris Hilton, who has not shown he can stay healthy and has an opportunity to potentially test the waters in professional if he wants to. And then you've got 2 signees in Teron Francis and Phillip Wright. That's basically it. So that's not going to get it. You got to go get some dudes. And you got to go get a legit number one receiver. It's an easy sales pitch at wide receiver. You got, right now, a fifth-year quarterback going into his second year who was top 10 in the country in passing. You've got playing time readily available and a program that produces a lot of NFL talent at wide receiver. It's a good sales pitch. Then you toss the money in. You got to go get a number one wide receiver. I talked about this last week, so we won't go too deep into it. But you know the guys that I'm talking about, the Jamison Williams and the Jermaine Burtons and those guys that have made that type of impact transferring to another school over the years. Now, that's number one. Number two is not a position we've talked a lot about, but as I look at the roster, like, it's something LSU's absolutely got to address, and it's edge rusher. Kevin Peoples did a fantastic job this year with Braden Swinson and Savion Jones. Neither one of those guys was a real impact player last season. They played behind Ovi Gofu, and they just weren't impactful players last year. Well, Swinson had a monster year. He's probably going to be a second or third round draft pick. And Savion Jones had clearly his best year of his four in Baton Rouge. He lost a little bit of weight. He was really good at times against the run. He showed some pass rush ability. Those two guys had good seasons. But they're moving on. And so is Deshaun Womack, who has announced his intention to get in the transfer portal. So you've got a pretty clear void on the edges right now if you're LSU. Gabriel Welliford was a big-time recruit, played a little bit this year, and he's got the talent to be an all-league type player. But he's not proven to that point. And what's opposite him? You've got Dylan Carpenter, who didn't play very much. I thought Kalaj Cobbins had a really good camp, but he's a little bit undersized to be a defensive end, more of an outside linebacker type. CJ Jackson did not see the field on this team. So, like, you don't have a lot of proven depth at edge. So you bring in Damian Shanklin in this class. I don't know if he's going to be ready or not, but that's really it. And that's not good. Like, you've got to get after the passer if you want to win at an elite level. And I don't see anybody on this roster that has proven they can do that. Everybody that's set to be on the team next year, you pull them all together, they've combined for half a sack in college. Half. So if you're LSU, you got to go find the next Princely Umanmielen, who left Florida, went to Ole Miss, and had 10.5 sacks. You got to find the next Nick Scorton, who left Purdue, where he was the Big Ten sacks leader and played for A&M this year and is going to be a top 15 pick. You got to find that guy. You've got to get difference makers on the edge. I'm okay with holding one spot for Gabe Relaford. I think he's a good player. But you gotta go get somebody else to get after the passer. The third spot that I've got, and I was specific about this on the website, it's a little bit more fluid than this, but just bear with me. I have left tackle. Go get a left tackle, because that's the best player on your offensive line, way more often than not. Am I going to go nuts if LSU adds an elite center instead? No. You need help on the offensive line, is basically, but if you can solidify the left tackle spot, I think you can play with some pieces elsewhere. Maybe Emory Jones comes back and handles right tackle. Maybe he bumps down to guard. Maybe DJ Chester is your second-year starting center. Maybe he moves to guard and Cohen Eccles moves in. Tyree Adams, who may be the heir apparent to left tackle, maybe can move into guard if you bring in a left tackle. I don't know what the future holds for Weston Davis either. Paul Mabenga played well in his last couple of games. Like, you've got some options, and you're going to have to mix and match on the offensive front. But I kind of would like to start with a stud left tackle. If there's one out in the portal, boom, LSU needs to get on that in a hurry. So you got number one, wide receiver. Number two, edge rusher. Number three, left tackle. Number four, tight end. We talked about this last week. But Mason Taylor moves on. You got a couple guys in the program, Kamorian Pimpton and Trey'Dez Green. They can't block. I believe they'll be better blockers in 8-9 months than they are today. I believe they're willing. I believe they're going to put on some weight. But their skill set is going to be pass catching. That's what they're best at. You need a 265-pound tight end that can get in there and block SEC edge rushers, that can get in there and help you in the run game. You need to add that. That shouldn't be expensive, shouldn't be super hard to find. I feel like there are a lot of big physical dudes who may not be the fastest, may not be elite pass catchers, that would like to come play football at LSU and get dirty. Tight end, number 4. And number 5, I've got quarterback. Now, If Garrett Nussmeier declares for the draft or Garrett Nussmeier enters the transfer portal, which we'll see, then that becomes number one, obviously. Ricky Collins has moved on. You've got A.J. Swan. You saw that in the Vanderbilt game, Oklahoma game. You've got, no, was that Vanderbilt or Oklahoma when Nussmeier got hurt?
That was Oklahoma.
Going together. Okay, Oklahoma. So, yeah, that's right, because he came back, so we got to do it for the seniors, all that. That's right. That goes to number one if Nussmeier moves, but you've got A.J. Swan, you've got Colin Hurley, and you don't have one in this class. So while some might put it towards the top right now, honestly, if you've got Garrett Nussmeier back, I'm not uber concerned with who the backup quarterback is. That may be short-sighted, but I just feel like most teams that lose their starting quarterback are going to be in some trouble. Yes, I watched the SEC championship game over the weekend. If LSU wants to bring in some talent at quarterback, I'm all for it. However, it's probably going to be difficult if Nussmeier stays because not a lot of players are jumping in the transfer portal to go sit on the bench. So if you can find a young guy who's willing to sit a year and feel like he's the heir apparent to Nussmeier after he leaves, well, that's great. It just feels a little bit difficult to find. Most guys are going to transfer where they can play. So I put quarterback down at number 5. That'll complete my list. Goes wide receiver, edge rusher, left tackle, tight end, and quarterback. And we'll see how aggressive LSU is allowed to be. I'm fascinated by this because we have not seen an aggressive LSU in the portal. And we all assume that's going to happen. But let's be realistic. Like, LSU is not the only team in the country who is entering this offseason going, hey, we need to be aggressive in spending money in the transfer portal. Like, that's what almost everyone is saying. Save Clemson, everybody else is getting on the phones today and setting up visits and trying to restock the shelves. Dabo's probably at the pool or something, but everybody else is trying to get in the transfer portal and make it happen. And LSU's very much in that, and we hear they're going to be aggressive, but just how effective is that going to be? That fascinates me, just how much LSU can flex in said transfer portal. We'll know the names of the guys that they're looking at. We'll see who they're competing against, and we'll find out how deep those pockets really are. Because as constituted right now, LSU does not have enough talent at wide receiver. The offensive line is very much a question mark. You've got half a sack returning at defensive end. You don't have a tight end on the roster that can block. And your quarterback situation beyond Nussmeier is tenuous. So there are clear issues that have to be figured out. I'm curious how LSU goes about that, and we will find out over the next month how well LSU can go shopping. That's our Genesis opening drive here on this Monday. We're brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. All your printing, scanning, copying needs, Gulf Coast Office Products, GCOPnet.com. We come back. LSU got a win on the basketball court yesterday. I'll give my thoughts on that along with some sound from Matt McMahon. That's next on The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. Safety is a big deal in the bathroom, especially as folks age. That can be a hazardous area in the house. Make it safer. Mitigate some of those issues with non-slip floors, with a bench in the shower, with guardrails around the slippery areas. All that can be done with the folks at One Bath and Closets. Walk-in tub, make things very convenient, safer. If you've got a loved one that's aging in your life and they want to stay home, but could be an issue, David Vall is happy to help you with that. They got financing available, 18 months, 0% if you qualify. Start that process today with a free consultation at OneBathAndClosets.com. It's One Bath and Closets, OneBathAndClosets.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Here, Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Denton Day in an hour and 15 minutes talking college football. I've got my thoughts on the college football playoff. I actually made a college football playoff bracket that is just based on my own criteria. Nothing to do with anything the committee did. We'll see if it looks better than the one that they came up with yesterday. Talk about that a little bit later. Plus some news from Saints land. Derek Carr, broken hand, is very likely to miss the remainder of the season. So we'll get to that here in a moment. LSU back out on the basketball court yesterday against Florida Gulf Coast. I don't know if this is going to be a Sweet 16 run for Dunk City. They did not look very good yesterday. But LSU did play a pretty good basketball game. I think if you look at the final score, you might say, oh, I mean, they only won by 9. Like, that's not that great. It was 18 with about 3 minutes to go. Florida Gulf Coast threw in 3 late threes that made the score look a little prettier from their perspective. But LSU controlled the action really from the start. There were no issues with that slow start that they've been getting off to, trailing these poor teams at halftime and then whitewash them in the second half. They really got off to a good start in the game and never really looked back. If you look at the first half box, LSU shot 54% from the floor and 43% from three-point range. They made 6 of their 7 free throws in the first half. It was a pretty solid effort. I didn't like the 9 turnovers early in the game, but I have a theory on a little bit of that. Chest had 3 of those, and then you had another one there from Damian Collins, and those guys are playing more minutes than they had. They're being asked to do a little bit more offensively than they had with Jalen Reed now being out, and I think that you can chalk some of those turnovers up to those guys just not handling the ball a lot early in the season. But really, when you look at it, LSU played a really good basketball game and kept Florida Gulf Coast at arm's length for the entire ball game. My biggest thing I was watching in this game, and I wrote this at LouisianaSports.net, was what do the LSU front court players look like offensively with Jalen Reed out of the picture? He is clearly the most skilled and productive offensive front court player LSU has on the roster. Damian Collins was a 5-star recruit, but through basically 3 years in college, he's been more of kind of a around the rim player, lobs, putbacks, kind of dirty work stuff. Corey Chest, very much the same type deal. Neither of those guys is often going to put the ball on the floor and create anything. They're not great shooters, but they're going to have to do something offensively. You can't rely on the guards to do everything on the offensive end of the floor. And I thought in this game that Damian Collins and Corey Chest did give you some punch on the offensive end of the floor. In fact, I asked Matt McMahon after the game in his post-game press conference, like, what did you like from Damian Collins offensively? And here's the answer he gave me.
I think it's a great observation. I've always said the probably most surprising thing when we first got Damian here was I didn't realize how skilled he was as a player. And the way Gulf Coast was defending the ball screens, Damian was able to work in that short roll area, 12 to 15 feet out right by the free throw line. And I thought he was really effective as a passer, but also you saw him hit that nice little floater on the SEC logo. You saw his footwork, ability to get to the rim. I thought his skill package was on full display there on the ball screen attack.
I completely agree with Matt McMahon on both points. I thought Damian Collins absolutely showed some polish offensively, and I thought it was an incredible observation by me.
I think it's a great observation.
Just a great observation by me. What an observation guy I am. Look, I was impressed with Damian Collins. He stepped out and hit a 3 right after halftime. He did hit a little floater in the lane from, as Matt mentioned, the SEC logo. You saw at another point he pump faked, got a guy to leave his feet, and then he stepped under and had a little finger roll that showed a little bit of touch as well. So, look, nobody's going to mistake him for a first-team All-American or the nation's leading scorer anytime soon. But just a little bit of polish on the offensive side goes a long way. I don't expect Damian Collins to hit a 3 most nights, but if you can show that that's at least part of the arsenal, then they at least have to respect it. And that was what I was concerned about as Jalen Reed went out. You had to go guard him on the three-point line. He's a 40% three-point shooter last year in league play. Like, you can't just leave him out there. And in my opinion, teams can leave Corey Chest and Damian Collins out there and sag in and try to cut off driving lanes from Cam Carter and from Jordan Steers. And that is a big problem for LSU because those two guys have to create offense for LSU. And so if Collins can at least go out there and give you something, then teams have to respect that. And look, Damian Collins led LSU in scoring yesterday. He had 18 points. He was 8 of 13 from the floor. And then you look at Corey Chess, and he was extremely efficient on the offensive side. He was 6 of 7 from the floor, scored those 12 points, and he grabbed 12 rebounds as well. So I thought an encouraging effort from LSU's front court players in their first kind of game to prep for with Jordan Reed being out. He went down 2 minutes into the Florida State game, so they effectively had to play the game without him on Tuesday, but they didn't prepare that way. They at least had a chance to prepare in this game, and those two guys went out there and started, and I thought gave LSU some really quality minutes in the game. The guards were very, very good, especially shooting the ball. You look at Jordan Sears, Jai Bailey, and Cam Carter. Those three guys combined to go 7 for 16 from three-point range. That's rock solid for them, and they're going to have to carry a lot of the scoring load here. All of LSU starters were in double figures, and they got to 80 points against a team that really wants to slow it down. Florida Gulf Coast entered this game in the bottom 15 teams in the country in terms of pace. LSU entered this game 25th in the country in pace, and LSU was able to push the pace. The Tigers scored 80 points in the game. They got out and scored more than 40 points in the first half, so that was good for LSU to kind of dictate that pace and to play at the pace that they wanted to. I thought that while the turnovers were a problem in the first half, they cleaned that up in the second half. They only had 5 turnovers in the second half. Cam Carter and Jai Bailey played a clean second half as far as turnover goes, which was really nice to see. And the other thing that you look at in this game is that Noah Boyd was able to return to action. He's coming back from a torn ACL. If you're completely unfamiliar with Noah Boyd, that's fine. He's junior college transfer, 7-footer that LSU brought in. I don't know how big a role he's going to have in SEC play, but when Jalen Reed goes down, you've got to at least account for the fact that on a given night, Damian Collins and/or Corey Chess could get into foul trouble. Robert Miller would be next to come in, but it's just nice to have that other body in Boyd who's big and strong and can maybe get in there and grab a couple rebounds and at least give you 5 fouls that you've got. So he had not appeared in the game yet. He was just cleared to practice this past week and was able to get out there at the very end of the game for about a minute. So he's close to being able to help just a little bit. Beck, you pointed something out to me that I did not realize at the game yesterday. Of course, in the first half of the game, I was chasing a 3-year-old around.
Yeah, we need to get a report on that.
Buying chicken fingers. He loved it. Had a great time. Left at halftime. A little scared of the mascot Mike. That's a little bit much for him, but he did enjoy the basketball. He did spill ketchup all over himself and dumped the entire chicken tender basket down into the row in front of us. That's good. Which happens. That's what it is. Enjoyed some lemonade. Had a good time. He very much enjoyed it, but I did not notice as I was chasing him around, Mike Williams did not play in this game, and they cleared the entire bench and brought in the walk-ons and Trace Young and Adam Benayoun, and they did not play Mike Williams, which is a little interesting.
Yeah, I'm concerned as I think you are as well. I texted you last night, and I was like, man, Mike Williams didn't get in. What happened there? Because I didn't get to watch the game. So yeah, that's a bit concerning, especially in this day and age where we have guys, if they see the writing on the wall, they may decide, or even during the season, hey, I'm gonna, step away and get ready to go in the transfer portal. So not great, because I really think Mike Williams can be really important to this team next year. Whenever you lose Sears and Carter and Bailey, but this year obviously, it just so happened that LSU was able to bring in 2 really good guards. And roll 3 really, and so now he's got to kind of have to stay back. So I don't know if he's going to stay, but we'll see.
And Curtis Givens, he played 13 minutes last night, so you're playing the freshman point guard as opposed to Mike Williams, who's a sophomore. And candidly, I'm looking for a little bit more out of Curtis Givens. He has not looked super comfortable. He's not shot the ball well at all. I'm still really high on Curtis Givens, to be clear. I loved his film in high school and think he's got a bright future.
Struggling.
Good thing we got a cough button there, but that's not fun. But Givens, I'm expecting a little bit more from him, and right now I don't know how much he's going to be able to help in SEC games, but they got to have somebody to come in and help run the point, and Williams has proven he can do that. And I'm like you, I'm curious that he didn't get in, and that just doesn't paint a rosy picture. To be very clear, we don't know anything.
No,
and there certainly hasn't been any news or there's no. It's just an observation that in a game where every player on the roster except Mike Williams got in and the freshman point guard played 13 minutes, it's curious. So we'll see. LSU doesn't play this week. They're off for finals. They won't play again until they go to Frisco on Saturday to play an 8-2 SMU team that is in the ACC now. So we'll talk a little bit more hoops as we move forward, but I'm curious that Mike Williams did not see any playing time. But I thought yesterday against a team that's not very good in Florida Gulf Coast that LSU played a solid basketball game, and the 9 points is not really indicative of what LSU did on the floor. They were clearly the better team and had control of that game by upwards of 15 points for a significant margin of the second half. So LSU wins that game. They'll take the week for finals, and then they'll go play the SMU Mustangs coming up on Saturday. All right, let's step aside. What are the Saints going to do now? They're starting quarterbacks out for the rest of the year. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boudreaux's Electrical Services. Of course, I'm going to tell you about Boudreaux's Electrical Services. Give yourself the peace of mind to know that the power is not going to go out at your home or your business. Get a Generac home standby generator installed in your home soon. Know that hurricanes are in the rearview mirror for this year. There's always another season around the corner. And if you ride out a hurricane and the power goes out, that's a big bummer. Even if you evacuate for a hurricane, you don't want to come back to a house that's 97 degrees and has everything rotten in the fridge. You want to come back to a cooled house that's powered up and moving. And that's what you can have if you get that Generac home standby generator from the folks at Boudreaux's Electrical Services. You can call either phone number, but I would prefer to just tell you to go to the website. It makes things a lot easier. You can get that quote and start your process today with the folks at Boudreaux's Electrical. They are online at boudreauxelectrical.com, boudreauxelectrical.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
All your printing, scanning, copying needs, Gulf Coast Office Products, gcopnet.com, gcopnet.com. You know, the beauty of doing business with the mom and pop shop is that you're going to have a great relationship with your customers. The beauty of doing business with the big box stores, they've got all the resources possible. But the downside of dealing with the mom and pop shop is they may not have the resources. The downside of doing business with the big box stores, you're just kind of a line item for them. Gulf Coast Office Products is right there in the middle, right there in the sweet spot. They've got plenty of resources statewide to help you out with your printing, scanning, copying. They've got a lot of techs that can be out and help you out if you've got an issue. They've got plenty of machinery that's right here on site in Baton Rouge or throughout the state. They can get to you in a pinch if you need that. But they also have a great relationship with their clients. And that's what Trey Beal prides himself on. He's fantastic to work with. We do here at Guarantee Media. If you're in the market for printers, scanners, copiers, Gulf Coast Office Products, gcopnet.com. All right, the Saints and Giants played yesterday, and I'll be pretty blunt. It was not a work of art. Those two teams are not good. They did not look good yesterday, but the Saints did do enough to win, and they did so in dramatic fashion. It looked like the Saints were going to let it slip away. They controlled the game the entire way. Defense was smothering a terrible Giants offense, and then they go down and get a touchdown, and they get the 2-point conversion to Neighbors, and the Saints can't put it away offensively. You got a backup quarterback in there, and you give the Giants the ball at the end, and then Locke gets loose, and then he hits Neighbors, and all of a sudden they're down there in the field goal range. You're thinking, well, they may take a couple shots at the end zone, which they did, and they may beat you, which could have happened. Instead, the Saints thwarted that. Giants line up for a field goal, and Brzee blocks it there near the gun. And that was, as bad as that football game was, and it was bad, that play Brzee made was incredibly athletic. And that's what you saw from him when they were putting together the highlight package when they drafted Brian Brzee. Like, this guy is big, but he can really move. And I thought that yesterday was as good a game as he has played in his year and a half in New Orleans. I thought he was active. I thought he was disruptive. He got back there for a sack. He had some batted balls at the line of scrimmage. I thought Brzee looked fantastic in that game. And then he makes the play to win it. And I thought that was pretty fitting that he was the one that kind of nailed it down at the end. I thought he was great. The Saints offense struggled. They could not run the ball at all against a bad Giants defensive front. That was disappointing that the Saints couldn't get anything going in the run game. And Derek Carr did what he could do, and then he's trying to make a play there at the end to try to win the game, to convert that third down. He goes airborne, and apparently on this dive, he broke his hand and had a concussion. Like that's about as bad as a dive can go. So Darren Rizzi has just met with the assembled media down there in New Orleans and confirmed that Derek Carr does have a fracture in his left hand. The reporting from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network was that was going to cost Derek Carr the rest of his season. It was going to require surgery, and he would miss the rest of the season. Darren Rizzi just came to the microphone and said, no, it's not going to be season-ending. It's his offhand. It's going to be a week-to-week thing. And this is Hunt talking, not Darren Rizzi. Now, I'm betting Derek Carr goes out there and tries to play. And there's not really a point in that.
No.
It seems like a fool's errand, but that's just what we've seen from Derek Carr. If he can buckle his chin strap and get out there, he can do it. And it doesn't matter how much pain he's in. Now, he missed those games early this year because he literally couldn't throw. Like, he could not raise his arm to throw the ball. So that pretty much disqualifies you from playing quarterback in the National Football League. Last year, he was probably too hurt to play, and he gutted through it and went out there and played. It did not look good, and when he got healthy towards the end of the season, he played significantly better. No surprise. My guess is that we're going to see Derek Carr back sooner rather than later. I think a lot of players would just get this thing operated on and get to the offseason. I just don't think Derek Carr is wired that way. And so I expect to see Derek Carr at some point. You saw Jake Haener go into the game yesterday. The question now becomes, will you start Jake Haener or will you start Spencer Rattler in this game? Rizzi said today that the entire staff determined that they were going to go with Spencer Rattler initially when Carr got hurt this year. You've got a different staff now because Dennis Allen is gone. So we'll see what the decision is here. I kind of think that if Clint Kubiak has a big say here, and I'm just not sure what that dynamic is between Kubiak and Rizzi and who really makes that call. If I'm Rizzi, I'm letting the offensive coordinator determine who's going to be the quarterback, but sometimes head coaches say, hey, I'm the head coach, I will make the call, and then we'll figure it out after that. It feels like since Kubiak was here when the Saints drafted Spencer Rattler, that would be the guy that you would go to, but we haven't confirmed that. It was not a great go for Rattler his first time around. The Saints offensive line was massively compromised at that point. Now the wide receiver group is massively compromised, so it's not a perfect situation, but it's a little bit better. I think if you ask a quarterback, hey, I'm going to decimate one of your units, you want me to decimate the offensive line, you want me to decimate the wide receiver group, I think they would say, go ahead and decimate the wide receiver group. I need my protection up front. I need to run the ball. So he'll get that opportunity, hopefully, if it's his turn, but it's just not a lot in that first audition that gives me a ton of confidence that we're going to see some sort of spark from Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, on Derek Carr, it's very admirable and respectable that Derek tries to play through injuries, but he needs to just sit out the rest of the season. There's no need for him. I mean, technically speaking, the Saints
are still alive, baby.
Alive
still
because
alive.
The Falcons the Bucs have won 3 in a row, but they've played against terrible teams. But the Falcons keep throwing up on themselves.
They're awful.
They're really bad. But man, Derek Carr, that was such a that was a terrible play on his part. Why would you think that you're not that athletic? You pull on a zone read and try to get around the edge and dive in the air like Superman and get hit hit midair and fall on your hand. That was just a very unsmart play by him.
It looked like a fairly benign dive. And then all of a sudden you find out not only did he break his hand, he's in concussion protocol.
He went airborne, Hunt. Derek Carr going airborne is not good for the Saints. Don't go airborne. Run out of bounds and get 3rd and 1 and get converted.
Derek Carr going airborne is not good for the Saints.
It's not.
You need to play that McMahon bite there. That's great insight by you. Really big, really good insight there by you. I mean, no, he plays hard. You can discredit Derek Carr for a lot of things.
Yeah.
He's never won much as an NFL quarterback. He's not a all-pro caliber guy. It doesn't appear he's ever going to be a division winner or make a run to a Super Bowl. Like, there's plenty to criticize in Derek Carr's game. What you cannot criticize with him is his toughness and his willingness to fight and play. He gives you everything he's got when he's out there. Just happens that everything he's got isn't all that great. But I think he's going to be out there. And if I'm a Saints fan, this is not a fun conversation to have. I preface it this way every single time, but we're going to have to be frank and have the discussion. Like, the Saints are a long way away from being really good. And I think that the best thing here, if you're a Saints fan, this does not apply to the organization internally, but if you're a fan on the outside, like, you'd kind of rather see Spencer Rattler, and if he plays really good, then that's great. Maybe something to build on in the future. If he plays terrible and you lose 4 games at the end here, then you get a better draft pick. Like, that's kind of the win-win in this situation. If Carr's out there and you win some games, like, that doesn't prove anything. And maybe there's some Saints fans that are still clinging to the hope that the Saints can make the playoffs. I've kind of let that go by the wayside here over the last few weeks. But like, I'd rather see Rattler out there, and you can kind of make peace with whatever result it is. If it's really positive, great. You got a young quarterback who's showed some promise. If it's a negative, then hey, you're going to move up in draft position. You've won too many games now to think you're going to get like a top 3 pick or anything. You're now, what is that? That's 5 or 6 wins.
They're 5-8.
5 wins. So you've won too many games now to really angle for a high pick. But anything's better. As you continue to move up, it's better by the run.
I'll take the 7th pick over the 17th pick.
No doubt. I mean, that's kind of where I've been, but I understand the Saints fans that want to say, "Hey, we're still clinging to hope," and haha, the Falcons suck.
So okay, let's just really quickly just dive through the NFC South real quick. Tampa Bay are 7-6. They've won 3 in a row. They got the Chargers. They got to go to LA. That doesn't mean anything. It's basically going to be a home game for them. Who cares? They got to go to the Chargers, who are playing pretty well, and then they got to go to Dallas, who are terrible. They got to play the Panthers, and they finish with the Saints. So theoretically, let's say, I mean,
playing the Cowboys and the Panthers. If you're a Saints fan and you can work that into 2 losses, God bless you.
Yeah. So let's just say, they lose to the Chargers. They're still going to be at 9-7 going into that Saints game. The Saints, so then that would mean the Saints are going to have to win out.
They're going to have to win out. The Saints had to win out anyway.
Yeah, they have to win out anyway. So it's not looking great.
No, it's not. And look, Sunday was not exactly super encouraging.
No, it was terrible.
The Giants are awful.
That was the worst game. I think that might be the worst game. The worst game the Saints have played this. Even the losses. The Chargers loss was not great. Broncos loss wasn't great, but that was a horrible performance against a really bad team.
It was just so boring. Like, it was just a punt fest. It was a 3-and-out fest for the entire first half.
You couldn't run the ball against a terrible Giants
had nowhere
defense.
to go. But look, they stopped the run. The Giants really only offense in the run game came when Locke ran for 25 yards at the end of the game. Like, they didn't do anything either.
Yeah.
But they hung in it. They were in the game. They had a chance to kick the field goal to tie. So it's not like you're on some sort of ascent here if you're New Orleans. You scraped by against one of the worst teams in the league, against a team that's certainly going to fire its head coach and may make some more changes with that roster up there in New York. So not super encouraging, but we'll see what the future holds with the Saints at quarterback, as Derek Carr has broken his non-throwing hand. If you're looking for Saints content, you can always find it on YouTube, Hunt on Saints. You can also find all of our Saints content in podcast form, wherever you find your content. Podcast, go to Hunt on Saints. Search it, like, subscribe, rate, and review. We always certainly appreciate all of that. All right, we'll step aside. We'll close out hour number 1 coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every car online is on the lot, and vice versa. Online, it's at genesisofbatonrouge.com. It's the only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state of Louisiana. If you're in the market for a vehicle, you're probably going to end up on Airline Highway if you're in Baton Rouge. If you're on Airline Highway and you're shopping for a vehicle, just make one more stop. Check out Genesis of Baton Rouge right there across from Women's Hospital at Pico on Airline, and stop on by. Tell them the Hunt Palmer Show sent you in. You'd like to take a look around and get behind the wheel of one of those Genesis. It's just a fantastic product. It's sleek, stylish, comfortable, safe. Got everything you're looking for in a luxury vehicle. It's right there at Genesis of Baton Rouge. You may not have ever been behind the wheel of a Genesis. It's fairly new to the game, and it's certainly new here in Baton Rouge at that location on Pico. Try it out. This holiday season, go get behind the wheel. Just give it a look. Genesis of Baton Rouge. Check them out online, genesisofbatonrouge.com, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here on the Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Hope your work week is off to a good start. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Denton Day coming up in about 45 minutes. I'm going to lead off the second hour with my proposed college football playoff bracket that doesn't have any criteria at all, just the best tournament possible. I will give you that coming up here in about 12 minutes. College basketball latest net rankings are out. LSU comes in this Monday edition at number 56. That's down 6 spots from this time last week, even with the win over Florida State, Florida Gulf Coast. Going to drag you down a little bit there, but LSU number 56. Incidentally, there are only 2 SEC teams that are lower than LSU in the net. You've got Texas at number 64, and then you've got South Carolina, who comes in at number 98. So everybody else is ahead of LSU at 56. I'm going to do something right now, and I can almost guarantee you that I will have this exact same segment in like 3 weeks. Almost exactly. But I feel like I can do it now too. I need to mentally prepare LSU fans for what is going to go on here in January and February and early March. Because what the SEC is doing right now in basketball has never been done before. There are multiple stories that are out there about the SEC, their one-loss record, their wins against the top 5, where they are in the rankings. There's never been a conference that has had a start to a season like this. You look at the net rankings. Tennessee's 1, Auburn's 2, Kentucky's 5, Florida's 7, Alabama's 10. That's 5 of the top 10. Then you go down a little bit further, and you get to Mississippi State at 20, Georgia at 22, and Ole Miss at 29. You look at the games that the SEC has won. You're talking about beating Houston twice. You're talking about beating Duke. You're talking about beating UConn, North Carolina. Yesterday, Missouri, who's not even thought to be a great team, beat number 1 Kansas and controlled the game from start to finish. John Rothstein covers college basketball about as fervently as anybody in the country. I would suggest probably as much as anyone. And his tweet from yesterday kind of says it all about the current state of the SEC. It's just been remarkable. And I'm scrolling through to get to this tweet. But it talks about the depth of the league, not just the fact that Alabama and Auburn are really good. Not just the fact that Kentucky is talented and Arkansas has got some first rounders. You're talking about teams toward the bottom. He tweets, Vanderbilt, who was picked 16th in the SEC preseason bowl, is now 9-1 and 4-0 this season against power conference opponents with this win over TCU. That's a team that was picked last, and they're rolling people. The same goes for Missouri. So it's the best league in the country by far. And LSU is going to have some really rough nights in the league. Really rough. You're going to get blown out some. And you're going to lose a lot of games. I don't see a world where this LSU team is going to go 12-6 in this pressure cooker. So my approach to conference play for LSU, and this is me personally as I watch it, you got to take every game individually and not worry about the fact that, oh my gosh, we've lost 3 in a row. Every game individual, and LSU has got to find a way to get to 8 league wins. If you can go 8-10, I don't care how you get there. If you can go 8-10, I think LSU will have done enough to get in the NCAA tournament because of what they've already done in the pre-conference and because of the respect I believe that the SEC will get. Because keep in mind, this whole thing shuts down on January 1st. then all your games are in league. So the way that your league will be shaped is done in the pre-conference, and the SEC is steamrolling people. So it's going to be rough, and you can't give up on the season or give up on the program because LSU's lost 3 in a row in the league, because it's just going to happen. But they've got to find a way to scrap and fight and claw and get to 8 league wins. That's my mentality for this team. And that's an odd thing to say about a team that's, whatever they are, 8-1, that has already 3 Power 5 wins, and you're thinking, well, this is a team that can really compete. And maybe they can. Maybe they'll prove me dead wrong, but I don't anticipate it, because you start to look at some of these stretches in the schedule where you've got at Missouri, who just beat Kansas, at Ole Miss, who's in the top 25, Arkansas comes to town with 2 first-round picks, at Texas A&M, who scored another ranked win yesterday, at Alabama, who's a top 5 team in the country, Auburn, who's a top 5 team in the that's all in a row. And that is not to mention a stretch later in the season.
6 in a row there.
I mean, that's not to mention a stretch later in the season where you have Florida, who's top 10 in the net. Then you have Tennessee. Those are both home games. You go to Mississippi State, who's ranked. Then you're at Kentucky. Then you got Texas A&M. That's the close to the season. So, it's just going to be really difficult. And you've got to enter it, in my opinion, and I'm being a little bit preachy here, but I'm just trying to get the point across. You've got to enter that 18-game stretch knowing there can be some bad days. You run into an Auburn team that's knocking down shots, you could lose by 30 easy. It is what it is. You run into an Alabama team. We've seen a Nate Oates team come into the PMAC. I remember sitting at that game, and they came in and they made everything they looked at for the first 8 minutes of the game. Everything. And LSU lost the game by 20. I mean, it's just never competitive. And that's going to happen some. And that doesn't mean you suck. That doesn't mean the season's over. That doesn't mean you can't make the tournament. You've just got to find a way to scrap and claw. LSU is going to be outmanned, in my opinion, in quite a few SEC games. We just have not seen a league that looks like this before. So I'm just a month out from starting SEC play. I'm starting to get in the mindset of man, you got to understand that every once in a while it's going to be bumpy. And you may have a week where you lose a couple games that you're not that competitive in. You just got to come back and try to get the next one, because you're trying to get to 8 wins somehow, some way. And it's a different approach than we really have on campus in really any sport. But that's just the nature of what this league is right now. It's wild at this point. So that's closing up hour number 1 here. We're going to step aside for Sports Center. Let's talk some college football playoff. I've got my version of a bracket. We'll see if it's better than the one the committee put out on Sunday. That's all next.